Okay, welcome to day 31. We're at the end of the book of Job, and some crazy things that are happening here. We end with God speaking to Job, and also speaking to Job's friends, which is a great thing. You all right? Okay, so let's get at it. And then I want to end with explaining two main points about the whole book. Verse 7 says, "Brace yourself like a man." And again, he talks to Job. He says, "Because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. Will you discredit my justice and condemn me just to prove you are right?" This is great. Will you discredit my justice, God's perfect justice, and condemn God just to prove that he's right? Just to prove that Job's right? Come on, really? Take a look at Behemoth. So I want to point out these animals, or I guess they're animals, that God has made and describes in here. And it's not the only place that's described. I think this is the only place that we have the Behemoth. But Leviathan is talked about 2 or 3 different places, and I really want to talk about those. Verse 15, "Take a look at Behemoth, which I made just as I made you. It eats grass like an ox. See its powerful loins and the muscles of its belly. Its tail is as strong as cedar. The sinews of its thighs are knit tightly together. Its bones are tubes of bronze. Its limbs are bars of iron." So very different description than the Leviathan. So 2 different animals that he's talking about here. Very, very awesome animals that he has made. Verse 19, "It is a prime example of God's handiwork, and only its creator can threaten it." Not man, nobody else. So I don't know if that's something that has been extinct. It sounds like something that we don't have today. Chapter 41, "Can you catch Leviathan with a hook or put a nose around its jaw?" And then it goes on and talks about all the different things that about the Leviathan. Verse 11, "Who has given me anything that I need to pay back? Everything under heaven is mine." Everything. Think about this for a second. Everything that we possibly know of and beyond is God's. Everything. And anything you do belongs to God. Because of God, you have what you have. We can't take any credit for anything. He doesn't have to pay back anything. What an awesome thought. Verse 12, "I want to emphasize Leviathan's limbs." It gets back to Leviathan and its enormous strength and graceful form. 18, "When it sneezes, it flashes light." Whoa, this is crazy. "Its eyes are like the red of dawn. Lightning leaps from its mouth. Flames of fire flash out." Something crazy. It sounds like a flying dragon, but this is talking about it being like crocodiles. What it sounds like as you go through the different forms of what it is. Maybe it's like the dragon in Japan or China. Something huge, different than what we know of today that is being described here, the Leviathan. And it sounds like it's an animal of the water, but also can be on land. Absolutely crazy 2 beings that we're talking about here. As he mentions these 2 animals, something that he's created, something greater than anything a man could possibly defend against. Verse 31, "Leviathan makes the water boil with its commotion. It stirs the depths like a pot of ointment." Verse 34, "Of all the creatures, it is the proudest. It is the king of beasts." Our king of beasts that we know of today, that we call the king of beasts, is the lion. That's not what is being described here. And so I would have to say that these 2 beings are extinct in our day of today. And then let's get into chapter 42, verse 3. "You asked, 'Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorance?'" And this is Job talking. "Who is this that questions my wisdom with ignorance?" He's quoting God. And Job says sheepishly, "It is I, and I was talking about things I knew nothing about. Things far too wonderful for me." Okay, so he's talking about he's admitting he's talking about things that he doesn't know anything about. Anytime we try to think that we have an understanding of God, we really should second guess what we're saying and bite our tongue. Okay, verse 5, "I had only heard about you before, but now I have seen you with my own eyes." Anywhere in the Bible where someone has seen God falls faint dead, falls to the, anybody who's seen an angel falls to their knees, because angels are created to be these wonderful looking beings. To see God, think about Moses, and when we're going to read about Moses here in the next couple of chapters in Exodus and beyond, he gets to see God, and at the point where he is almost dead, and when he comes down from the mountain after seeing God, his face is a brilliance that people can't even look at. Moses has to cover his face. We're talking about Job having the chance to see God. Now I've seen you with my own eyes. I take back everything I said, and I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance. Verse 11, so finally God says, he goes at this next sentence. Okay, after the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, and he goes on and talks about him, and then what he's going to say to Job's friends and say, hey, you didn't speak of me accurately. He's like, how dare you? So neither did Job. Okay, and we're going to get into the main points of the Bible, of Book of Job here in a minute. But I wanted to make sure everybody understood that, they got talked to. Verse 11. Job gets all his brothers and sisters and former friends came and feasted with him in his home. Job prayed for his friends. The Lord restored his fortunes. In fact, the Lord gave him twice as much as he had before. And they consoled him, comforted him because of all the trials the Lord had brought against him. The Lord allowed Satan to do these things, and the Lord is responsible for this. You need to get this. The Lord is responsible for everything. And that's why a lot of people shake their fist at God. It's like, why'd you let this happen? Really? Really? Do we really want to go down this road again? It happens for many different reasons. Okay? We'll come back to that. So the Lord blessed Job in the second half of his life even more than in the beginning. For now he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 teams of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also gave Job 7 more sons and 3 more daughters. He named his first daughter Jemimah, the second Keziah, and the third Karen Hapach. In all the land, no women were as lovely as the daughters of Job, and their father put them into his will along with their brothers. Job lived 140 years after that, living to see 4 generations of his children and grandchildren. Then he died an old man who had lived a long full life. Okay, so here, this last part is kind of important. It gives us an idea of the time period that Job is in. He lived 140 years after this. So we're getting to the point where people are only going to be allowed to live 100, 120 years. He lived 140 years after all of this had happened. He had already had a family, and he lived 140 years after this. So this puts it about in the time period that we are reading it in Genesis, after Genesis, into this point, where people were living a certain amount of time, but yet their lifespan is not as long as it was at the beginning. That's, I think, another reason why we put Book of Job in this position. Okay, that's the end of Book of Job. So let's talk mainly, real quickly, about the 2 biggest points about the Book of Job. First of all, we need to understand, I think a main point from this book is we have to be compassionate for people who are suffering. We have to show grace and mercy, all of us, and it's a lesson to be learned. That's why we read the Book of Job. The second point behind this is we all need to understand that we didn't get that Job's friends didn't get, and Job didn't understand what was happening to him. He just was suffering. Job's friends got it wrong. They said, you should say you're sorry. Well, he didn't do anything wrong. And Job was saying, I didn't do anything wrong, so somebody needs to come to my aid. You know what? We need to accept the things that happen in our lives. We need to give God the glory. And again, throughout all of this, Job didn't curse God. So Satan was wrong. Satan said, you're going to take away your health, you're going to curse God. It didn't happen. So Satan lost that. And God used Job to prove that we can overcome. We can be overcomers. And we can defeat the sin. But we can't do it without Christ. We can't do it without God. And I think Job kind of fell away from that. He wasn't going to God. He was kind of saying, God, you're doing what come to my aid. He wasn't really acknowledging that God was there for him. And God kind of set him down and said, hey, how dare you? I can take care of everything. And what did he do in the end? He really took care of Job. But that's the thing we need to make sure we understand, is that they didn't understand what was happening to Job, and Job didn't understand either. God is there for us always, and He's infinite. It is very hard for us to understand an infinite God with our finite knowledge and wisdom. The true wisdom comes from fear of the Lord, and this is a perfect example of it. So that's the book of Job. I hope you got a lot of great things out of it. I know I did. Every time I read it, it's amazing what I learned. So that is day 31. Congratulations. And I think we go back to Exodus after this. So I'll see you tomorrow.